everybody. I'm Tessa Shepperson and I'm here today with Sean Hooker.
Hello Tessa.
And we are going to be having another Westminster briefing.
Another Westminster briefing.
So, we've got some topics here.
Right, okay, alright.
And it's going to be a lucky dip. So who's going to pull a topic out, Sean?
Oh, go on, I'll pull a topic out.
Okay, you pull one out, see what we're going to talk about first.
Okay, right, okay. So there we go. NLA and RLA equals NRLA. Right,
I think that's a strange formula. What does that mean, Sean?
Well, do you know what I think that means? I'll tell you what that means. Is that the two largest landlord associations have decided to join forces and to merge into one organisation called the National Residential Landlord Association.
Which I think is a good idea.
Brilliant idea. You know,
but why didn't they do it years ago?
Well, I think it's the way, you know, when you build up an organisation, you build up a culture, you build up a following, and I think, although you're on the same page often, it takes a little while for people to realise that you're stronger together.
Yeah.
I think that's their catchphrase is now, stronger together, because they know that in this day and age that landlords need a strong voice in the market. There are lots and lots of really good landlords out there, and effectively they try and lobby the government, they try and get their point across. And actually they're very constructive. I think, we've dealt with David Smith from the RLA. David
Smith is fantastic,
Steve Norris at in NLA. All on the right page, but they need to have a strong voice in Parliament.
Yeah.
And in this, the noise that's going on at the moment in politics, you've got to have a strong voice, and bringing together close to what's 80,000 individual landlords being brought together into one organisation must be a good thing. And of course this week, they passed the vote between the members.
They've agreed
gone through the constitution, agreed it, and this week yesterday in our day, they've announced appointment of a brand new CEO who will be joining in November, and that is a person that I know very well, and you know very well.
I know, yeah, Ben Beadle.
Ben Beadle, who used to
Great
work
guy.
for TDS.
TDS, yeah.
Yeah, and ran in Northern Ireland, and then I think he went over to
Touchstone,
yeah.
Yeah.
And Ben's young, enthusiastic.
He's fantastic.
He's a driver.
Yeah.
I've worked with him, because the tenancy deposit schemes work together. So when I worked on tenancy My Deposits, we worked very closely together. And he's got very clear ideas of how to grow an organisation and how to to get across the issues of the private rented sector. So that's what that little formula means. So that's brilliant. That was quite an easy one to start with, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I shall pick out the next one.
Okay.
Let's have a look. What have we got here? Party conference.
Oh, party conferences. They go. While we're filming this, they are ongoing. So the Liberal Democrats have had their party conference. Labour
is ongoing at the time.
And then next week, possibly, the Conservatives will have theirs. Although
they may go back to
strange times at the moment. We're filming this on the day that the Supreme Court made the judgment on Boris Johnson's proroguing, and Parliament's been recalled. Well, we'll see how that all goes.
Who knows what's going to happen?
But the party mechanisms do go ahead. So I've had a look at the party conferences and what's actually gone on in regards to our private rented sector, specifically, because I think that's what our viewers are very interested in, and it's also something I think whatever's going to happen politically and elections coming on, that the housing will be at the top of the agenda. I really do hope so. It should be, and it is starting to get to that position. So what did I find out? At the Lib Dem conference, the main thing there is that they've passed a motion, and the Lib Dem members vote on policy motions. So this is now going to be Liberal Democrat policy, basically affirming their support for the scrapping of Section 21.
Yeah.
And reading the motion, it did deal with a lot of the retaliatory eviction issues. It talked about the insecurity of families, especially families who are moving to areas now relying on the private rented sector. How are they planning for the longer term in terms of schools and provisions and other stuff there, and the threat of being told, at a relatively short period of time, that they're going to be homeless and have to find a new accommodation. Interestingly, they did a very balanced debate, and there was a two or three speakers who got up and said, actually, that's fine, but let's have a look at the unforeseen consequences of this, and that that landlords are providing a huge service at the moment to the sector.
To society,
yeah,
really.
I think in a recent blog I compared them to the little flotilla of boats coming across from
Dunkirk.
From Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And of course, there's some bad ones out there.
Well, there are, but they're actually in the minority.
Yeah. And I think Paul Shepperson has been pretty forthright in pointing out the risks of simply just going down the scrapping of Section 21. And if that occurs, what's going to happen is that there could be homelessness, there could be a backlog on the courts, there could be lots of things that need to be taken into consideration. And so, frustratingly, all the parties committing to a final end before they've actually said, well, actually, this is, let's have a look at the evidence. Let's see how we would progress.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things, I think. I agree that Section 21 is perhaps bad for society because it gives tenants a feeling of insecurity, and I get that. Yeah. But I think there are two issues. One of them is that the threat of taking away the right to use Section 21 is a very good mechanism for getting landlords to comply with their legal obligations.
Yes. Absolutely. All the different bits that you will be prohibited to do.
Yeah, so, serving the gas, serving the EPC, the right to rent booklet.
Returning the rent that you've taken, those fees that you've taken for...
That's right, for the unfair fees, the deposit, protecting the deposit, all of these things. So, if Section 21 is taken away, that will go too. The other thing, which I think a lot of people don't realise, is actually tenants do often ask for Section 21 to be used, because what often happens is tenants find, perhaps through job loss or marital breakup, that they can't afford to pay the rent. They want to go into council housing, they want to be rehoused. If the landlord evicts them for rent arrears, they're not going to be rehoused because they're deemed to be voluntarily homeless because they're being evicted because their fault. But if they're evicted under Section 21, they are likely to be rehoused. So the tenants will ask to be rehoused, and the landlords will often do that for them.
Yes.
So if Section 21 is taken away, then that's going to be a big problem for tenants in those circumstances because they may lose the right to be rehoused by the local authority. Yes. Because the only way the landlord can evict them will be through rent arrears, and obviously if they can't afford to pay the rent, that's going to happen. Okay. So I do think that's something that needs to be thought through.
No, absolutely. And I think now that the three parties have aligned on a commitment.
Yeah, so it's going to happen.
Now the work, the new NRLA and the other organisations, Property Market, ourselves, everybody, Paul Shepperson and Landlord Action, we need to kind of go and say, well, actually, let's have a look at this in a considered way, a holistic way. Let's have a look at it, at the whole thing, and see if we can move that on to a better place than where we are. Okay, so... I'll come back to that a little later.
What worries me, though, is in our system is MPs get upset because tenants go in there with these dreadful stories, which are obviously true, because there are very bad landlords, and they get very upset about it. They say, right, what shall we do? We'll get rid of Section 21. And they don't really think it through properly, because that may not be the right solution. It may be the right solution, it may not, but often I think it's a sort of knee-jerk reaction. Housing law is very complicated.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's not a simple area of law, and it's not a simple area of policy. It's there's an awful lot of things, it's very convoluted. And I am worried. I mean, I sometimes think probably Lord Best is about the only person in the government who knows anything about it, because he's, lots of MPs, they haven't studied it. They haven't got a background in housing, and it's not an easy thing to do.
It's not an easy thing to get your head around. Moving on to Labour Party. Now, what's the headlines from the Labour Party? John McDonnell announced there will be rent controls if the Labour government gets in.
Yeah, that's a little worrying.
A little bit worrying, but I think you have to dig a little bit deeper. To be fair on Labour, is that it appears that it isn't going to be back to the
Rent Act.
The Rent Act, it being dictated from above. What they're thinking of doing is empowering local authorities or regions or whatever to set rent limits based on what they're going to be calling local income. How they're going to measure that, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Basically say, well, actually have a look at what people are earning in the area and then set a rent limit. And they were talking about something like a third of your income should be spent on housing, a maximum of a third of an income, which is quite interesting because there's been some quite high profile data research into especially the millennials, those 22 to 30 odd people who places like London account for 70-80% of renters, that say in London, for example, they're spending over 40% of their income on that. So already you're looking at, well, actually, does that mean effectively that rent will have to be reduced by 10% to bring it into line with whatever policy? I think they need to be careful with this. I mean, I saw something quite interesting. I can't remember where it was now, but it was a case from Malta. And I think it was Maltese landlords were bringing a claim under the human rights legislation because the rents that they were entitled to charge were so low that they said it was impacting on their right to get the benefit of their property. And that could happen here if it went too far. I mean, the trouble is with the old Rent Act, the rents that the fair rent officers were supposed to set were supposed to be in line with market rents. Yes. But the trouble is, the only rents that they had were other fair rents, and they went down and down and down until the level of rent that they could charge was so low that landlords couldn't afford to do the repairs, and standards dropped and nobody wanted to rent, and it sort of spiralled out. Yeah, I mean, very interesting. I was speaking to Gary Trett of the valuation office, and he was saying that one of the things they're trying to do is get more data on what actual rents are. Yeah. And so rent officers have got the right to go in and ask for rents to be given over. They want to liaising with the deposit schemes and others to try and just get a database of what actually is going on out there in terms of real term rents. So I think that's going to be something that I support, that we need to help provide the information, proper facts before you start making knee-jerk policies. Yes, quite. Yes, and that's the point. It's evidence-based, and this is the whole point. And actually, to be fair, we've all watched, the way the legislation is done, the consultations, the committees, and everything else. And there is a lot of work that goes on in the background in terms of churning the figures and looking at evidence and all that sort of stuff there. But politics is still about the impact and talking to a constituency from the heart rather than from the head. We in the professional world are used to dealing with facts, and evidence, and and not just kind of like shooting from the hip or from speaking from what we think is a presumption of what's going on. Now, what else are Labour proposing? Some kind of contorted right to buy thinking. This right to buy kind of like which Margaret Thatcher kind of like coined in the 90s. I'm very negative about that. I mean, I think we ought to get rid of right to buy completely from everywhere. But it seems to be like a magic word to politicians. Word right to buy, voters will flock to it. Yeah. So the Conservatives flirted with right to buy within the social landlord sector, which just slowly disappeared off when it was shown to not to be workable. Now they're talking about two elements as far as I can see. One is the right to buy, earned by long-term tenants in a property, or even short-term. I'm not even sure, they haven't really defined that policy, but basically a tenant moves in, you rent the property for a period of time, and then basically can exercise a right to buy from a landlord, and the landlord's kind of got his hands tied behind his back to sell the property on, whether that be at a discount, whether that would be at market rate. It's not really very clear, but it's basically, I don't know. Is it a gimmick, or is it something? I don't know, but I think if it's bought in, I think what landlords will do is that they will either exit the market, or they will do their level best to let the properties on licence agreements, or they will Airbnb, or they will use the property for holiday lets. It will be a disincentive for landlords to have proper tenancies for families. And that's the point. So the AST and the security that gives, or any other secure tenancy, will be bypassed, and therefore renting will become very much a transient, short-term
It's got to be
solutions.
worth the while for the landlord to rent the property,
correct.
otherwise he's not going to do it.
Correct,
I mean,
yeah.
landlords don't have to rent property
Yeah.
out, they're a free agent.
Okay, and did you also hear that they're thinking of extending right to buy, Leicester's Labour Party expanding right to buy to local authorities to buy up large corporate landlords out, you know, if there's a housing need. Now, again, not a lot of detail about that, but that's another thing that the Labour Party are playing with.
Yeah, I mean, if a property is in poor condition, I think there's an argument for that. You know, if a property is, or if it's being left empty, they could compulsorily purchase it. I don't see a problem in that. But I mean, if it's perfectly proper property being let out, I'm not sure about having a right to buy in those circumstances. I don't know. We haven't really seen what it says.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's the problem with the Labour Party is I think you know, they are appealing to their constituency, to their supporters, you know, with big kind of headline policies with not a lot of detail. That's attracting, on the other hand, kind of like pop shots from, you know, from the industry and you know, press and other like there. And really, you know, we've not kind of like drilled deep enough in to see if these policies have any merit or are workable or are just pie in the sky.
I mean, what is the point of allowing local authorities to requisition properties on the one hand, if then on the other hand they've got to sell them off to the tenants, you know?
Well, that's the point.
I'm just not happy about right to buy at all. I
agree with you. And it's a concept that you know has this kind of like status that is not deserved.
One of the reasons we've got a housing crisis, I think, is because local authority property has been sold off and they haven't got anywhere to house people in need. It's because it's been sold off under the right to buy. I mean, why should somebody, just because they live in a council house, be able to buy a property at an undervalue?
Yes.
Somebody else who couldn't get a council house, perhaps in the same circumstances, isn't able to buy. You know.
No, absolutely. And you know, so that seems to me what the headline coming from the headlines are coming from the Labour Party, which is basically, you know, this empowerment. You know, they call it empowerment, but you know, I think it would be a Trojan horse, I think, for a lot of people. It
will be interesting to see what the detail is.
A lot. Yeah,
it may be good. It may work. We don't know.
Let's keep a balance on that. Now the Conservatives. I mean, I had to scour quite a bit to find anything to do with the private rented sector in the Conservative agenda and outline. And although they've now got, and it's quite interesting that you know that there has been a little bit of a revolution in the Ministry of Housing.
Well, they've changed all their ministers.
Well, that's the point. Now, estimate that, you know, cut the number of ministers, you know, who are responsible for housing, and they've really got Estimate Faye, who's going to be heading it up, and you know, and I think she's a bit of a pin-up for the Conservatives, you know, with her media background and everything else, and I think, to be fair, you know, she's not an expert. I don't guess she's an expert on housing, but I think she's been brought up in that hotbed of political, you know, in Liverpool, you know, where housing has always been a very, you know, political issue in Liverpool. You know, it goes back years to Derek Hatton and all the stuff there, and Michael Heseltine going up there for regeneration. So housing has always been something which has been a Liverpool issue. You know? So maybe she'll bring some of that experience into that. But I think her core, and what the Conservatives' core agenda seems to be twofold. Is one is this commitment of trying to build houses.
She seems to be focusing on building rather than on renting.
Yes.
Everything she says seems to be on about building, from what I've seen.
Yeah, so a lot of it's going to be about the building, and
which is good.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's not the whole picture.
It's not the whole picture, and you know, so scouring through the papers, it appears that renting is being discussed at the Conservative Party conference, but in what they call their fringe. So the way parties hold their conferences, they hold big events in the main arena, and then there's a whole host of of discussions and forums in what's called the fringe. And both the NLA and the RLA are talking or hosting fringes on the at the Conservative Party conference on the future of the private rented sector. And I think there was another one I saw there where quite interesting, private invitation only, which kind of like saying, well, who are they inviting to this? And another discussion being held.
Because the Tories have pledged to take away Section 21. Or they've said they're going to, but it's interesting actually because I like to listen to any questions on the radio.
Yeah.
And one of the programmes a few weeks ago, I can't remember the name of the minister at the new housing minister under the Boris government. He was on the panel.
Yeah.
He was on the panel, and
the young chap. Yeah.
Well, one of the panelists says, "Are you definitely going to get rid of Section 21? Please tell me that you're going to do that." And he didn't answer the question.
No. And
it was quite noticeable that he avoided it.
Although there hasn't been a change in the colour of the government, there has been a change in the administration, and there is indication that people close to Boris Johnson are more on the deregulation side or the freer market side, which indicates that their commitment to reform and legislation might not be as passionate as Theresa May tried to make it in her administration. Saying that, and just going off on a tangent a little bit on that, talking to the industry, when I was at the Letting Industry Council event, which I attend regularly, it's held. Held with all the great and the good from the industry comes, and they also we've gone this far on regulation, we cannot stop now. The Roper report, which was the Lord Best regulation of property agents, was a very detailed and interesting solution on trying to make this sector safer and the reputation to be higher and standards to be at the level that they should be, and an industry fit for the 21st century and the challenges of modern Britain, rather than leave it purely to the free market. Innovation and competition is very important, but I think most people who are trying to run decent businesses don't want to see an industry with rogues and criminals and incompetent people.
I think the industry should be regulated, personally.
Yeah.
I think letting agents should be regulated. I also think landlords should be regulated, which will cut out the rogues, and they have some basic training. They know what they're doing.
Yes.
And perhaps even a fit and proper person test.
So I think you're going to see, the Conservatives maintaining at least the notion that they will continue on with the investigations into this.
Although at the moment they're in dire problems, we definitely know what's going to happen.
But I think they've already appeared to come out with a strapline. What the NLA reception friend meeting, apparently it's called Homes Fit for Families, and I think that's going to be touching on giving more security. That's hence the the longer tenancies and maybe the Section 21. So. That's going to be a powerful political message for the Conservatives. They like family. They like kind of that's where they see their constituency. Maybe Labour sees theirs more as the millennials and the younger people. That's all stereotyping them, but they're slightly different constituencies. But that's why I'm optimistic. There's some momentum to keep that going. Will go on, because I'm committed to regulation of property agents, especially with training, kind of the courses that you do and the other organisations do, and we're looking to do, are all about raising standards in education, and that can only help a professional, the professionalisation of the industry. And thirdly, I think it's important to understand that you need an even playing field. So I very much kind of welcome landlord redress.
Yeah.
So
do I.
We're looking at things like that. Oh, stamp duty is the other one. Wait for details. So that I think would dominate it. What they're going to do with stamp duty. They were talking about moving stamp duty from buyers to sellers. I think they've backtracked on that. But there may be reductions and incentives and other stuff there. I think the pessimistic landlord will feel, well, actually, they might be given to first-time buyers and families, but they'll probably claw it back from landlords who are in the, you know, investing in that, which they've already done in, you know, so far. So whether there's going to be any relief for landlords on that,
we'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. So that's the Conservative Party. Greens have yet to do anything for their conference, and you know, maybe in the future I might touch on some of the environmental things that they want to do. But I think all three parties are now trying to grab that land as well, especially in housing, in making houses that are environmentally fit.
Yes, well, I think that's really important. I mean, we've talked about all the issues that are around, but I mean, actually, the number one issue is the climate.
Yes.
That is actually more important than anything else.
Absolutely.
I mean, I agree with Greta Thunberg, who made a very emotional speech to the United Nations.
I wouldn't want to be the receiving end of that. So
she was completely right.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a funny world when a 13-year-old is
the only one. She's you know, it's the emperor's clothes, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're right, the environment is important. So that's conferences for you. So all right, what's the last one here?
Let's have a look.
Let's have a look here. All right, okay. Current consultations.
Right.
So I think it's a fairly short one really, because you know, we know, you know, the big consultation that is coming up now. We've already touched on it with Section 21 and longer tenancies. Is this a new deal for renters, which is basically, you know, what is going to lead, if the recommendations go through, to a complete change of the eviction process. We'll get rid of that one in a minute. And so Section 21 goes, it cannot go in isolation in my view.
No.
And the consultation, I think, you know, then kind of goes on, do we have a housing court? Now, we've discussed that before.
Yes.
And there's slightly different issues on that. I think it comes down to an agreement, and I've talked to Paul Champolina about this. Yes, fine, but put the resources in so you reform.
Yeah, it's not much point in doing it if you haven't got any resources.
Okay. But it's also looking at maybe longer tenancy. So is this the end of, you know, of the AST eventually, at the end of this process? And, you know, are we looking at changes or a revolution in the private rented sector on par with, you know, with the 2004 Housing Act, and a change of that radical.
Yeah,
there's enough, I think, on the agenda for them to do that.
Yeah.
Problem is that with everything going on, parliamentary time is so
they haven't got the time. All the ministers have been, civil servants have been yanked off to do with Brexit.
Yeah, yes, so that's going on. There's also a consultation on opening up the rogue database to
yes, well, I think they should do that.
I think, you know, it needs to be done. I think more orientated towards enforcement and other things there, but a review of the Homeless Reduction Act 2014. So again, that's the third one that I'm aware of. So the first two I've mentioned, the New Deal for Renters and the rogue database, that closes on October the 12th, and then 3 days later, you know, if you're specialist on that, the Homeless Reduction Act, and those consultations finish. So that's so far what's going on.
And then we'll find out what happens afterwards. We'll come back and do another Westminster briefing.
Yeah, and as I say, it goes through there, and you know, the inside track so far on the New Deal, they have already received in excess of 1,500 consultations, and there's still 3 weeks to go. So get your say in. You know, sign up to the consultations. You share the link with them.
We'll put the link
and
in.
Get that over, and you know, because this is going to be, in my view, the most pivotal kind of change, because it could lead to a complete overhaul of the of housing law on the private rented sector, and all the implications, unforeseen consequences that we've talked about, and other people have talked even more eloquently about, like Paul Champolina. So actually, you know, it's like everything else. There, will the government have the will, the majority, and the time to do it? Time probably being the biggest essence, because everything has to be done immediately. Yeah. And you know, at the moment, with everything that's going on in, you know, Brexit and everything else, Parliament barely has enough time. A little bit
to
more
make a
now
cup of coffee.
A little bit more time now that the proroguing has been overturned, but you know, time is still the issue. I think we're running out of that now.
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe I should just very quickly mention that there are 2 cases you need to keep your eye on. One of them is the challenge to the Section 21 gas safety regulation issue, which I understand is being heard in January.
Right.
And the other case people need to watch out for is the challenge to the government under the right to rent rules.
Right.
And that case, I think, is also being heard in January.
In January.
So we'll come back in a couple of months' time and do another Westminster briefing and tell you what happened.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tessa.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.